So this lesson's a little bit different. In the previous lessons, we've always had the function rule written for us. We're gonna actually learn how to write a function rule. This can take a little bit of time, okay? You gotta be patient. You have to ask yourself, what do I have to do to this column to get to this column? Our rule is always gonna start with the second heading, okay? So this h of x equals. Now, what do you have to do to this column to get to this column? I have to, my first thing is I could add 20, right? Negative 10 plus 20 would be positive 10, but then adding 20 doesn't work here. Remember, it has to work for every row. How about multiplying by negative 1? Because negative 10 times negative 1 would be positive 10. That would work, right? But it doesn't, it works here too. Works here, but then down here it doesn't work because 1 times negative 1, this would have to be negative 1. So, this is where we have to think a little bit outside the box, right? So if addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, if none of that stuff works, then what you want to do is think about, like exponents or absolute value. And absolute value is what that's going to be, right? Whoops. I don't know why I wrote just absolute value of x. So if you take the absolute value of negative 10, you get 10. Absolute value of that, you get that. It works for every one. So then h of 4, of course, would just be absolute value of 4 is 4. Here we're writing a function rule. Again, the first thing I think of is a subtraction. Subtract 3. Hey, it works. Actually, it works for all of them. So what am I doing to the x column to get to that column? I'm subtracting 3 from x. So that's your function rule. So f of 0, remember that's the input. You just plug it up there. So 0 minus 3, of course, would be negative 3. Now to write a function rule, whoops, total distance traveled after n hours. So this here we have our primary variables already defined for us. Then we have to define the function. They're asking us to write a function for the total distance traveled. So that would be, it always has to be of the primary variable. So d of n is total distance. Now remember, if I'm driving down the highway at 65 miles an hour with no traffic and I'm on cruise control and nothing changes, in 1 hour, I've gone 65 miles, right? How about in 2 hours? I've gone 130 miles. How'd you get that? You took 65 and multiplied it by the number of hours. So d of n, the total distance traveled, is 65 times n. So there's typically 3 things you have to do here when you're writing a function rule from scratch. Now, you have to define a primary variable, which is what everything's based on. In this case, it's already done for us, n is number of hours. And then you do a function of that variable. So whatever letter you use here is going to be inside the parentheses there. Okay? And then after you define that, then you actually write the function. This one here is already, h is hours, number of hours. We're asked to write something for wages. So this is going to be W of H is total wages. And remember, whatever this primary variable is has to match what's inside here. Now, this is just like the first problem. If someone works and gets $75 an hour, 2 hours, they'd make 150, 3 hours, they make 225. You're just taking the 75 and multiplying by the number of hours. That's pretty simple, right? Now, there's the first variable. We're asked to write a function rule for volume. So V of n is, so n is the side length. V of n is the volume of the cube. So now we'll write V of n equals, remember, a cube is a special box. It's a box where the length, the width, and the height are all the same. So to find the volume of a box is usually length times width times height, but if they're all the same, if they're all x, it would be x times x times x, or in this case, n times n times n. N times n times n is just n to the third power. Now on the back side, there's a couple problems where we actually have to do it from scratch. Okay, we have to define the primary variable, then the function, and then write the function. Price of mailing a package depends on its weight. So the weight is what the primary variable is going to be. In this case, it's talking about per pound. So I'm going to do P. P is the number of pounds because everything's dependent on that. We're asked to write a function rule for the total cost. So I'm going to do C of P because it's based on the number of pounds. All right. Remember, what's in parentheses here has to match that. Now you actually write the function rule. The cost of mailing a package, C of P, is going to be what? $1.80. They're going to charge you $1.80 no matter what, plus $2.75 per pound, and that means P. Remember, per pound or each, that's code for sticking the variable with it. Now we're going to use this function to answer the next two questions. Use the function to determine the cost of mailing a package weighing 9.3 pounds. Now you ask yourself, is this the input or the output? And I hope you realize that this is the input. This is the P. So this is the same thing as doing C of 9.3. So we're just going to plug in 9.3 for P in our function that we wrote up here. Now you'll have to use your calculator a little bit. 275 times 9.3 is 25.58. And you add that together, you get 27.38. And I hope you ask yourself, 27.38 what? 27.38. Remember, this is cost. So this is dollars. That's how much it would cost to mail that package. Now in this next one, if the cost, so we're given the cost, this is not the input, this is the output. This is the C of P. This whole C of P is 14.80. That's going to equal $1.80 plus 275p. So this is a little bit more work. We have to solve for the input. We have to solve for P. So we, of course, you guys are good with this. You subtract $1.80 from both sides. You get 13 equals 275. You do a little division. And P ends up being 4.72. Now, 4.72 what? Remember, P is pounds. So that's how much the package must have weighed for it to cost $14.80. All right. You invest $210 to buy t-shirts. Then you sell them for $12.50 each. Write a function rule for the profit. Now you're making a profit by selling what? Selling t-shirts. So T is the number of shirts, and P of T is going to be the profit, because that's what you're asked to write a function rule for. So P of T, remember, sales, that's the same thing as revenue. You're selling them for $12.50 each, so $12.50 T. And then this is money that you spent, so that's a minus. So there is your function rule. Down here, you have to figure out, is this input? Use a function to determine the profit. You need to sell 120 shirts. What happened here? I'm out of time here. I'm going to have to stop this one a little bit early.